Hey guys, this is Sharat with REsimpli, host of the REsimpli podcast, bringing you a very special guest, Ray Glymph, on the podcast. Ray, welcome to REsimpli podcast. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live? What kind of investing do you do? Where do you invest? A little bit about your
Sure.
real estate background.
So I'm a serial entrepreneur and investor. I originally from Brooklyn, New York, but I currently reside in Morgantown, West Virginia. So beautiful West Virginia area. I am a full-time real estate investor. I have over 100 doors, still self-manage, and I love real estate. So that's why I'm here. Happy to be here as well.
All right. So you have 100 doors self-managed. That's incredible. I couldn't take it after I felt like 15, 20 doors. It got to be a little bit too much. It's interesting. I used to live in Brooklyn. Also, I went to school in New York and I lived in Brooklyn. The Coney Island area is
Mm-hmm.
Q train last stop
Yep.
is where I used
Born
to
and
live.
raised, Coney Island. Yep.
Awesome, awesome. So what made you move to Virginia? The investment, real estate investment, or
No, I
just
actually
something?
moved for school. So I came here for school and went to school for industrial engineering. But I dropped out and pursued, entrepreneurial spirit took a hold of me and I became entrepreneur.
All right. So you went to school for something totally different than what you're doing now. How did
Hmm.
that happen? Did you always have some inclination about towards being, an entrepreneur, or did you read a book? Yeah, walk me through
No,
that.
I've always wanted to do the entrepreneur thing. The freedom of making your own schedule was something that always appealed for me, even though once you become an entrepreneur, you don't make your own schedule. But that was always one of my goals and dreams and ambitions. And I still remember, the first time I think I snuck out of my parents' house. It was actually to make money. I snuck out and in Coney Island. There was a basketball park right across the street from where I lived. And had tap water that I sold at the basketball court for 25 cents a cup. And that
How
was
old were
my
you?
first. I couldn't even tell you, man. I couldn't
That's
even tell. I was
incredible.
young. I probably had no business being out the house by myself, but that's one of the things that I
Were
remember.
you always like just from, for as long as you can remember, were you always like kind of geared like this? You wanted to have freedom time, or, was there like one person in your life you kind of saw like, oh, I love kind of what they're doing. They don't have a 9 to 5 job. They just kind of have their own schedule. Like how did that happen? That's incredible that you're selling tap water at basketball park. I love that story.
You know what? I don't think it came from anywhere. There might have been some outside influence. Unfortunately, I can't give it credit because that's just what I remember. It was always just that hustle mentality. Coming from New York City, you always have that hustle
Yeah,
mentality
yeah,
of
for
be
sure.
better. How do I progress and get to the next level? And that hustle mentality was always in me. So, I mean, I always had like a very, very stringent work mentality. And, industrial engineers, we figure out how to make things more efficient. And that was kind of like my superpower is I just knew how to make systems more efficient. I can look at things and make them more efficient and see the flaws in them. So
So how did
that's,
you're going to school in Virginia for industrial engineering. How did real estate happen from there?
honestly, it was a mistake. I think of the way real estate happens for a lot of people. I was actually among some guys who were, I think, very much so, more educated than me and making more money than me. Some were lawyers, attorneys, doctors. Some other guys were, restaurant owners as well. Some guys were in politics, and they started throwing around these words of refinance, renovate, and we can rehab this and pull our money back together and then pull it back out and then use it to scale and get bigger properties. And at that point, I was like, man, I really want to do this. This sounds great. And when it came time to do it, nobody did it. And I was a person that did it. So that's kind of how the story gets to where it's at now.
So how old were you at this time?
At this time, I was probably about, I want to say about 22, 23.
Okay. So is this like a mastermind sort of a group that you're in
No, it
around
was
these
just the
people?
it was the friends I was around. And this is a true testament of the people you're around. You will eventually become like-minded or surpass them, especially when you deal with finances. So this was one of those examples of me hearing some terms thrown around, doing research, opening and expanding my horizon and seeing that there's more out there than just what I was doing at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% believe in, I'm sure you've heard that Jim Rohn's quote, like you're the average of 5 people that you hang out with. So you always
Hmm.
kind of want to keep reevaluating the 5 people that you're spending the most time with. So, okay, you hear these terms, refinance, like related to real estate and other cool stuff. Then what do you do? You're still in school at this time, right?
No, I was just an entrepreneur at that time. I had dropped out
Okay, so you're
already.
just an entrepreneur at
Yeah.
this time. So what do you do after that? Like, okay, I gotta look at, and you're still in Virginia at this point,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
All right, so you go out and start looking at houses.
Yeah, so I actually at that time I started doing research, trying to learn more about real estate as a whole. I knew people made a lot of money in real estate, and I thought that, at that time I was like, man, it takes a lot of money to get into real estate too. And so I started doing some more research, and I actually found a very sketchy guy on Craigslist. And I'm not sure if the people, it's kind of like Facebook Marketplace, but even worse. But I found a guy who was selling a property on Craigslist, and I ended up purchasing it. Luckily, this guy was legit. I ended up purchasing this property. I believe he was a wholesaler now, looking back, but I purchased this property, and this was my first property to get started. And it was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Oh, so you're not buying in Virginia, you're buying out of state.
Yeah, I bought the first two I bought were out of state.
Right? And now everything else is in
It's back
Virginia.
home. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So you buy this property in Pittsburgh market. Did you always want to buy rental properties? I mean, typically when someone's starting out, they start out with wholesaling, flipping, and then eventually the goal is to get to like, building wealth and passive income.
So my real estate journey really started on the first house that I ever lived in, and renting out the basement to a buddy of mine. And I remember we were just hanging out, and he was like, "Man, I need a place to live for the next semester." And I had owned a house at that time. I was like, "Well, you can rent my basement." He
Yeah.
was like, "Really? How much do you want for it?" And I was like, "It's just space that, I don't even use. It's vacant right now. You can just take it." And he made me an offer, and the offer was actually half the mortgage. And at
Wow.
that point, I was like, "Wow, this could open up to something." And now if we look around, we call it house hacking now, but at that time I wasn't familiar with the term, but that kind of got the wheels turning of like, if I did this. Eventually I ended up Airbnb in that basement, and that Airbnb actually paid for the mortgage fully on that house as well.
Wow. That's what I believe, for someone starting out, house hacking or doing like some sort of BRRRR methodology is the best way to get started. And you just like happen to do that without even knowing kind of what you were doing. Is that what you recommend, like for a newbie investor? Like the best way to start is like buy a house, especially if you're single, really no obligation or family that you have to take care of, then just buy a house, rent out the basement or the other rooms in the house.
Yeah, so I would say even if you're not single, delayed gratification, if you're not where you want to be in life, that delayed gratification can open up doors for you and open up horizons. So if you can sacrifice, even with a family, maybe you get a duplex or a triplex, and maybe you live on one side and your neighbors are really close to you. But if you could sacrifice, make that sacrifice for a year, 2 years, 3 years, that's when you really see the benefit of real estate, making it even 5 years. So for someone just starting, for sure, it might be, maybe buy a duplex or a triplex. It might be maybe you just rent out the rooms in there and you
Right.
live without, the mortgage, and you live rent free. I mean, imagine, not having to pay rent for 5 years. For the listeners, what could that save you? What investment can you have without having to
Yeah.
pay rent?
Yeah, and not only that, you're also building equity in that house.
Hmm.
You're not paying any, like it helps your cash flow month to month, and then you're building this equity. The value of the asset hopefully is going up also, and then you have other options at that point. So you own about 100 units. Like how have you gone about like funding these properties? Like how did you go about buying your first property in Pittsburgh or first 2 units in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, so the first one I actually had a line of credit.
Okay.
That was my first tap into equity using OPM, other people's money. I had a line of credit, and then I had credit card. I had some decent limit credit cards. That was my first way of, building and buying these properties. My first and my second one was used with lines of credit. And, your credit journey is very important. And also understanding the debt structure is very important as well. I think the credit card payment on those properties, I think it might have been about 500, but the property was netting about $1,000 a month. You know,
$1,000 a month?
yeah.
Wow.
So this exceeded at that time. That was like the 2% rule, let alone the 1% rule.
Yeah.
I had no
How
idea
long
what
ago was this?
this was about 8 to 10 years ago.
8 to 10 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's some pretty good deals back around
yeah.
like 2012, 14.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I had no idea what the numbers were, but I knew, hey, look, this is how much of a spread I can make on this property. Who cares about the debt? I'm making a spread, and I'll
Right.
pay the debt down. And that was like my first taste of like actively using debt. to make profit.
I'm curious, like you're from New York, you're living in Virginia, you bought a property in Pittsburgh. How come Pittsburgh? Like you're
Um,
buying it on Craigslist, so you must have been actively looking on Pittsburgh's Craigslist,
I
the
was
local area.
so I was trying to get in wherever I could and made sense and it was affordable, right? So,
Okay.
and I always tell a story when I look back at that house, I bought it in the wrong neighborhood. I overpaid for it, right? But it worked out for me. But that was a learning lesson, having to travel back and forth. I did a lot of renovation for my first and second properties. I did it myself. So traveling back and forth, doing that renovation, it was about an hour, hour and a half drive every day, going back and forth, So, but it was a learning journey as well. And I credit a lot of my success to that learning journey, learning the systems, the processes, learning rehab. Those are all things that I highly value now.
How important is that, I 100% believe like systems and processes, like always iterating the process that you have, like never feeling like you've reached like the finished product when it comes to your processes. How important has that been for you? And then when you look at some of the other investors, newbie investors that you see, I mean, it's honestly like the boring part of the business. Like people like poo-poo on it, system and processes. I'll get to it, when I have 50 doors or 100 doors or when I have a large scale business. But in my opinion, if you have it from the beginning, you can build that business much faster. Like how do you where did you get the mindset about of that? Did you have any experience where you didn't have systems and processes? And what
Sure.
do you do to just kind of stay on top of that?
I think it's an entrepreneurial mindset, right? Of having and documenting your failures. You have to document your failures if you want to be successful,
Right.
right? So every failure as a leader, I think, what could I have done better? I'm a natural leader. So at that point, if you're going to lead, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to be a real estate investor, you have to understand as a leader, how can I be better? What failure that occurred and how can I prohibit that and stop that from happening next time? And that is how the systems start to happen. So, for example, a tenant doesn't pay rent or they pay late. What systems can I put into place to ensure that I'm tracking that, to ensure that there are, stops in case they don't pay or, fines, late fees? What systems do I have in place? How do I manage my contractors? What application am I using? So I try to limit one, buy back your time, right? What things are costing you a ton of time that you need to buy back? That needs to be a system. What failures do you have, right? As I mentioned, the tenant paying rent late, that seems to be a failure. If there's a failure in your system, is it the tenant? Is it the tenant profile? What can we do to make sure that we, alleviate this from happening in the future? Did the tenant not have good credit score? Did we not do good background checks? What can we do to make it better? And that is part of a system. Document that system and then make sure that you apply it. I think it's very
Yeah.
important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if something breaks down, you want to go back to, instead of having a knee-jerk reaction, you want to go back to the system and process and see, okay, where was it just a one-off occurrence, or there was something in your process that you can improve so you can prevent it from. I absolutely love that. All right, so you bought your first couple of properties in Pittsburgh area, and then you're like, okay, this is great, making money even after making all these mistakes. So I want to scale down on this business. So you start buying in the local market, right? You start
Mhm.
buying rental properties at that point. How are you funding these and how are you buying these properties?
Um, so the first one, I didn't know any better, right? I'll be honest with the people listening. I sold my first two houses to scale into multifamily, right? And at that point, I owned them clear and free, but I sold them to scale. And so instead of refinancing the properties, I probably would have refinanced and been able to pull out more than enough from one property to pay for my multifamily. But I didn't know any better. So I thought the best option was to sell. But I did sell those properties, and that's how I got my down payment for my first one. And then from there, it became more of a BRRRR strategy and utilizing income from, my entrepreneurial businesses into more real estate. And that
Yeah.
kind of became how we got the ball rolling to continue to scale.
You mentioned other businesses. What other businesses do you own? Are they real estate related or totally completely
So right
outside?
now I have real estate related businesses, but it started out with, restaurants and bars. I started off with like a food truck. That was one of my
Okay,
first businesses. I was a vendor outside in cold temperatures making tacos.
nice.
And it started very small and very humble beginnings.
Yeah. And then from there, you're like, okay, just start buying into other businesses. So what other real estate related businesses do you own?
So we have a maintenance company, which is kind of ancillary to what we do, and same with property management. So those are both ancillary services that mitigate and help with my portfolio as
Right.
well.
And you're doing maintenance for other property owners also?
Yep. Yep. So that
Okay.
helps, that income helps scale and pay for my maintenance guys when I need something as well,
Okay.
and also keeps them busy for those guys,
Absolutely.
you know.
So you own 100 units. How many is that? Mostly large multi-families, or you have single family duplexes, or mix of all?
So I like this. That's a great question, and I like to think of this. I stay away from single families. Usually, if it's a single family, I usually don't buy and hold in my portfolio nowadays. I'll usually use it as a flip. I like to do the multifamily, and multifamily I define is going to be 4 units and above. Right. I
Okay.
have some triplexes, but I like the 4 to 10
Right.
doors are the sweet spot. When you get above, the 10 to 20, you start getting into the Wall Street kind of assets, bigger players. The bigger players won't touch the 4 to 10, right? So that's kind of like a really sweet spot. Mom and pop investors usually won't touch the 4 to 10 either, at least
Okay.
unless they're really young, they'll go for it. But the 4 to 10 tends to be a sweet spot for me, so that's what I really enjoy.
And how are you finding these properties?
I say the biggest thing is network,
Network.
right? You have to have a strong network. Reach out, let people in your local area know what you're doing. Join REIAs, group meetups, Facebook groups. Get around, expand your network.
So is that like you're mostly buying from, I've heard from some other investors, we've had on the podcast. I say the number one source for them for their properties have been networking with agents, getting pocket listings before they go on the market, and then just trying to negotiate. Like I feel like it seems like 50% of the deals, good deals, actually never show up on the market because they've already
100%.
been, done before
Hmm.
through the network of investors. So is that kind of how you're doing networking with
Yeah,
other agents in your
I
market?
agree. It not just investors though. You want to work with other real estate owners, right? I don't even want it to get to the point that you have to go to a realtor. I
Got
want
it.
you to say, "Hey, Ray, I'm thinking about selling this building." I want to be the first person you call, right?
Right,
A lot of times I might be the first person that you consult with and
right,
say, "Hey, Ray, what do you think this building is worth?"
right.
Right? And then that way
Got it.
I have an opportunity, because by the time it gets to the realtor and to the MLS and it's
Yeah,
about to hit that MLS, it's gone already. It's been analyzed by 20, 30, depending on what market you're in. It might have been analyzed by 100 people before you get to see it on the MLS.
yeah. That's a good point. Are you doing any direct to seller marketing for that
I don't. I mean, like, so my biggest thing is just having a presence, letting people know, like, hey, I buy real estate, letting
at the
people
local
know,
RIAs and
whether it
stuff?
be social media or just through my network, just through talking to people, having conversations, that I buy real estate.
So that's for the acquisition side of it. What about for the funding side of it? Are you doing the same thing, networking with other, high net worth individuals, letting them know kind of what you're doing, and then you get people interested in investing with you?
So this has kind of been my double-edged sword, is that I try not to raise capital, right? I know a lot of people like to raise capital. A lot of the deals I've funded have come from cash flow from my rentals now, right? Or from
Okay.
my business. So the cash flow I got extra cash. Let me see what we can buy, right? I'll put down that 20%. I'll fund that. Whenever you partner with somebody, you work for them. Regardless, they are an investor. Your goal, if you're a good investor, your goal is to make sure that you get your other investors a return. But in essence, you work for them. My goal is never to work for anybody. So I try not to fundraise or crowd raise or bring other people's money in, minus the bank if needed. However, partnerships do arise that they are mutually beneficial. But as far as like just raising capital, I try to stay away from it as much as possible.
So you're using the cash flow that you have from existing properties, you're using that down payment and just going down the route of traditional financing, right? Working with the bank.
Traditional or hard money, either way.
Got it. Okay. And then with given where the interest rate is right now, it's starting to come down a little bit,
Mhm.
or over the last 2, 3, did that change anything for your business? And how do you see that, the anticipation that interest rate is going to start coming down? How do you see that impacting your business moving forward?
So I like to correlate this. Real investors don't care about the interest rate. We care about the cash flow from the deal. If I can make it cash flow and I can make it work today's market, what does it look like in future markets? Right? I'm
Right.
making money in today's market, so in the future, we should bloom. As far as interest rates coming down, I think it's going to be great. I think it's needed. We have a inventory housing, somewhat of a crisis. We are short, I believe, about 4 to 5 million homes in the United States. So interest rates coming down is kind of a relief.
Right.
especially, people building. And so I do think it's necessary. I think they're a little late on the interest rates kind of being lowered, but better late than never. And I do think it's great, especially if for newer investors, it's gonna be good for you. But again, we have that supply and demand ticker where people are been sitting on the sideline waiting for rates to go down.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dry powder, so when the rates do go down, we just saw we've had a highest spike in a long time of refinances.
Yeah. A
So
couple, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah, that was pretty
yeah,
big.
so
Like,
and this is it's to be expected, you know.
yeah. So you have a pretty good sized portfolio, about 100 doors. You're self-managing. Was that by design, or you just kind of, got to a point where it just kept scaling and it just happened by default that you kept the management in-house?
Both. I think the design is very important. When I look at to like some of my mentors, like I look at listen to Ken McElroy, I've had a chance to meet him and some others, they do their property management in-house. One, you have a hand on it. If you hand your stuff off to a property manager, you're just one of the customers, right? Where if you do it in your house, you're the only customer. You can
Right.
focus on your property like nobody else would. Two, the percentage you pay. When you start to get to scale, let's just say, for example, I bring in 100 grand. Let's just say for even purposes, I bring in 100 grand. That's $10,000 a month that I would be giving to a property management company. I'm better off giving that to someone and giving them a salary and making them just focus solely on mine with the systems and processes that I've designed to work just for me,
Right.
and that works for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I own about 60 units, and then between my properties and other investors, we manage about 225 to 250 properties. And we were using a third-party property management company, but it got to the point like they're not doing anywhere good enough of a job with these properties that I could do in-house. And at that point, the money wasn't the big factor, it was just the quality of the service that we were paying for. It was just absolutely horrible. And once we brought an in-house, it made a difference like night and day. Especially, I own a turnkey business, so we buy properties and we sell to other investors. And they would have a great experience up until they bought the property. But once we handed off to the property management, a third party property management, it was just a big disconnect between the service that they were getting versus what happened afterwards. So yeah, I mean, I agree. Is there a number that you feel like for newer investors where it makes sense to keep the property management in-house, or someone who only has 1, 2 properties versus like someone like you who has hundreds of units? Does it make sense to keep property management in-house?
I think it's all dependent, one, especially if you're starting on your time, right? Especially when you get, your first door or two. It really doesn't take a lot of time. To be honest with people, it doesn't take a lot of time to manage that. If you got a couple hours, maybe in the first month, just to do your showings,
Right.
um, or you hire a real estate agent and give them a commission just to do the showings. After that, it doesn't take much time, especially if you're buying, a decent asset. But if you do not have the time, for example, if you work a full W-2 job and it requires, 80 hours a week, then it may be necessary for you to hire a property manager from day one, because the goal is to buy back and get your time and help you develop freedom. That is the point of real estate. And if it ends up eating more of your time because you're already time sensitive and struggling on time, then maybe from day one you might want to and put a property manager in. I'll definitely advise that for people. I work with people and talk to people a lot about real estate, and I have some high income earners, and they're required to work a lot, they're required to travel a lot. Well, maybe managing your property is not going to be the best idea for you.
Right.
But if you have a job where you just work from home and you have that free time, maybe you want to take it on and learn the property management process. So I really recommend that everybody learn the property management process, even with your first door,
Absolutely.
because you
And
can
you've
never
mentioned,
know if a property manager is taking advantage of you,
yeah,
right? You need to
absolutely.
know those systems.
And I feel like it's once you manage and you hand it off to someone, you at least know what the expectations are. Then rather than the property manager setting the expectation, to some extent, you kind of know going in, okay, this is what when I was managing, this is what I was doing. But now that I have an outside third-party property management company, like this is what they're doing. And you mentioned, Ray, a couple of times, like, buy back your time. It seems like that, and you're wearing a t-shirt that says freedom. So like having control of your time and money, it's very important. Like, what are some of the things you've done in your business and your personal life to buy back some of the time?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, putting those systems together. This week I'm putting in new systems for my maintenance team, right? So I can minimize communication with them. Because again, When I have to talk with them, I'm losing my time. Right? If I have to pick up the phone while I'm at the gym, I'm really losing my time. Even though it's just a phone call, it might be in between reps. I'm losing that time. I'm losing my focus. So that's one of the things I think. Making sure your property management software, having a good PMS is key. Even being able, like you mentioned, being able to find deals, having programs and working with people that can help you find those deals is very important as well.
This is, we're like towards the tail end of 2024. What's your long-term goal, or long time, I mean like 2 to 3 years? I think beyond that, it's kind of
Sure.
hard to, predict. But what do you see yourself, what direction you see yourself going in next
So,
2 to 3 years?
so here's the crazy part. This year, I told myself, Ray, I'm not gonna buy anything this year, and I've bought millions of dollars in real estate. Wasn't supposed to buy anything.
Why did you say that to yourself, and why did you buy?
Higher interest rates and then more stabilization, right? I wanted to make sure that we stabilize all the properties that I already had. And then just with the interest rates, it was a little scary. We didn't know where rates were going. At the top of the year, nobody had any idea how high we could go and how high we could climb.
Right.
But, things changed. We got more acclimated to the market. And so that became my goal. Right now, the properties that I buy now are with purpose. So I won't buy it unless there is a purpose behind it, whether it be, originally I'm going to fix and flip this, or, right now I'm working on a project. I'm building 10 apartments for veterans, people with disabilities, and low income. So it has a purpose. It has a why. And so the projects that I'm doing now, that is my focus at this point.
So you're building 10 brand new houses?
Yes, 10 apartments.
10 apartments. So you bought like a piece of land, and then you're just building a 10-unit building.
Yes. I already own the land, so we're just getting zoning and stuff to actually build on it now.
Okay, so this will be built to rent.
Yes.
Right. And is that kind of what you see yourself going in that direction over like next 2 to 3 years? Or do you have a number in mind that you have like 100 units, you want to get to 200, 250 next like 2, 3 years?
So originally that was my goal, was like, I want to get to 100. I want to get to 100. But now the goal is to buy better assets, right? So the
Okay.
number doesn't matter. I want to buy assets that I could help affect the community. So
Can you give me an example, like
yeah,
something similar
sure.
to what you're doing right
I
now?
just recently purchased a 12 unit building in a downtown area, right? The downtown it had been on a verge of emergence, but there had been some bad things downtown, a lot of empty storefronts. And so with that building purchase, I'm able to get new tenants in and change the perspective of what people view as downtown, right? Because empty storefronts to a downtown aren't good for anybody.
And at this point, you're financially free, you have the freedom of time and money. What drives you? Why do you get up in the morning? Like, what do you look forward to on a day-to-day basis?
I have family, so I think family is a big driver. Family and failure, the two F's that I live on, because there are a lot of people that depend on me to be successful, right? Not just family, but the maintenance team that works for me or works with me, and other people who I pay, they rely on me to put food on their plates. So I want to make sure, and not only them, but just the tenants, the community. The community is relying on me to help build, more sustainable housing. So at this point, my purpose is the give back.
Yeah,
How much can I help out?
I love that. Yeah, absolutely love that. It's interesting. Like we have a pretty decent sized team recently, and I didn't think about it. I didn't realize how it would impact me. But as the business started growing, we started hiring these people, and you see these people getting married, having their first kid, and like, wow, they're dependent on you to make sure you keep providing them, a good life, good lifestyle. And then you start kind of feeling that sense of responsibility. So I appreciate you sharing that. And then as far as your portfolio is concerned, like since you're self-managing, I'm guessing they're in like 2 or 3 cities, or like one city or one county, couple of counties where you're buying these
Yeah,
properties.
so it's spread out.
Okay. And you plan to just keep in that market? Do you have like plans to go into other markets?
At this point, I think the caveat is that I know my market,
Okay.
right? And that is your strength of knowing. A lot of people, they want to venture out to different markets. Well, each market has different laws, different eviction laws, different landlord laws. So you want to be familiar with those. So I'm very familiar with my market. I like to continue to buy here and then continue to build up the city here.
Yeah. And then you're pretty active on social media. You have a pretty good following on social media. So I'm sure you have a lot of investors, new investors that reach out to you and ask you for advice. For someone who's coming to you, what's the best way for them to ask you for advice where, you take a moment and you're like, okay, I want to provide them the right information. I'd really want to help, guide them in the right direction.
The easiest way is just to ask. Send me a DM, send me a message, reach out, ask. It doesn't hurt you. I'll answer. I answer all my questions. No matter what, I answer all my DMs, I answer all my
You do
messages. If
that
it takes
yourself?
Yep, if it takes me a long time, it'll take me a long time, but I will get back to you and I will answer. And I'll give you 110%. I'll give you an honest opinion.
Right. And what do you notice? Like the people who come to you ask you for your advice, and then you kind of see them, sometimes you get emotionally invested in their success, and you see some of the investors will end up getting their first deal, becoming successful, whatever their definition for success is, versus some investors that actually don't end up getting to that point of closing their first deal. Like, what do you see the big differences between those two group of investors?
Some took action and some didn't. Here's the thing, like not everybody in this world is meant to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody in this world is meant to be successful. Some people, and I go to conferences all the time, right? And I go to these conferences and sometimes I see the same people and I ask them, hey, you got your first deal? And they say, oh, not yet, maybe after the next one. And I'll see them a year later and they'll say, oh, not yet, after the next one. Some people just don't have it, right? They're missing something, or some people are just there for the educational or the networking experience. For the people that really want to get it, they will put the time, they will put the energy, and they will go get it. And I've worked with all types of people. I got another guy who just one of the guys, I'm really proud of him. He just closed on his first deal, but he took the time. You could tell like this guy was willing, he was committed. Where you have some people, and I work with these types of people where they just sit on the sidelines and they're just not ready to execute. And that might be the thing. Maybe they're just not ready. And it's okay to sit on the sideline. It's okay to not be ready, but eventually you're going to have to take action. All right.
Yeah. How do you know, like, let's say if I'm one of those people, how do I know if I'm ready or not? Like, what questions do I ask myself, or what questions will you ask me to help me kind of figure out whether I'm ready or not?
If you're ready and you listen to this, you'll feel it. Right. This will wake you up. If you really got it in you, this will wake you up to what's the next step? What do I need to do?
Right.
You'll be asking what is the next step. If you're really ready, this will wake you up. You'll try to reach out. You'll try to find other people, other investors, people who are doing this. If you're really about it, there are certain books that I've read that have gotten me off my seat and said, Ray, you got to get to work. Right. It
Yeah.
should inspire you. If you're really about it, you should be inspired.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's about, and then the people that are action oriented, they'll figure out, they'll reach out to people, whoever they need to, and ask them questions. They don't care about, like, at least I speak for myself. When I was starting out, I didn't care if my question was stupid. I just needed to get the answer, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm going to ask whatever question I need to ask to help me get to the next point. Yeah. And that's the answer that I consistently hear from other successful entrepreneurs is people that succeed versus the ones that do not. The biggest difference is taking action,
Mm-hmm.
not having all the information, just like moving ahead, kind of what you did. I mean, that's the perfect example. You just figured out, I have to buy a property. Like, okay, I'm going to buy in Pittsburgh. It just to have that goal achieved. It might not have been the best deal you could have bought, but it was just a stepping stone to help you get to the next one. So you could figure out what went wrong, iterate the process, and then go on, do better deals. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Ray, this has been absolutely incredible. We have three more questions to ask you on the next segment. The first one is, what do you do for fun?
Oh, fun. I love to hang out with my family. I'll be honest with you. That's what brings me joy. I love real estate.
Yeah,
So having conversations like these, networking with people and whether it be on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, I love it. So real estate and family time are very important
yeah.
for me.
Do you have any kids?
Two kids, two boys.
How old are they?
1 and 4.
1 and 4. Yeah, I have 7 and 4. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. Yeah, the joy of my world. Right. You mentioned like books that have helped you at different, seasons of your life to help you go from, one stage to the next. what are some of the books that you look back that have had the biggest impact on your life? It could be a personal book, it could be a business book, or one of each.
I feel like everybody says Rich Dad Poor Dad in the real estate world, so I'll stay away from that. But it's a great book if you haven't. A book that really gets me up is Grant Cardone 10X Rule. Hate him or love him, the guy's a great salesman and he's a great motivator. So when I feel like, I'm not accomplishing, I'm not hitting my goals, Grant Cardone 10X Rule. And another book is Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah,
Great.
all-time classic. Yeah. Final question. If you could spend a day with anyone, dead or alive, who would you want to spend the day with and why?
It's a great question. Ooh, that's a good one. I've never been asked that one. I would say Don Peebles. Don Peebles is a real estate billionaire. He does venture capitals. He's a higher up, and I would love to, kind of pick his brain if possible. He does a lot of networking and stuff. So Don Peebles, he's a real estate billionaire.
Oh, awesome. Great answer. Great. Thank you so much for your time. Someone listening to this, they want to connect with you, learn more about your journey. What's the best way for them to do that?
Send me a message, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Ray, R-A-Y, Glymph, G-L-Y-M-P-H.
All right, perfect. We'll put links to all of that in the show notes. Ray, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing your absolutely amazing journey. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.